All right. All right, so we got a part we're making. It's going to be for the mill that Preston and I are building ourselves. Preston says it's going to be some kind of shaft that connects the elevation dial with the gear and lead screw that actually pushes the table up and down. And he wants me to make it, so that's what we're going to do. I got a 1/2-inch aluminum bar stock loaded up in the lathe. Need to indicate its center, more or less. Not super critical, but closer is better. And then I believe we're going to start with this side over here. So we're going to take most of it down to 12 millimeters. Of course, Preston wrote this damn thing in metric instead of standard. All the lathe measurements are in standard. But we'll see if we can make it work. Let me bring a drink out here. Alright. So I've already gone through and converted millimeter to thousandths of inches, and this needs to get taken down to 1.89. Nope, that's the length. And he actually just modified that from 48 mil to 78 mil. So we're going to need to go get another measurement on that. Let's make sure we actually have enough sticking out, because I loaded this thing before he made the change. 78. And that looks like enough stick out. Plenty enough to work with. Alright, we need to turn the diameter down to 12. And then we have a threaded portion at the end, 3/8 by 16. So that's going to get turned down to 3/8. And we have a little snap ring groove right in the middle we're going to have to cut. I just modified this cutoff, this parting tool. That's the actual end we part with. I just modified the back end of it that never gets used. So it basically thinned it down to about 45 thousandths. And these E-clips are about 34 thou. So that's good for wiggle room. And yeah, it should be a pretty simple turn. So let's go ahead and get this indicated in. How do I keep losing everything? I just had it. Put it somewhere it wasn't supposed to be put. It goes right here. Nowhere else. Alright, let's see here. Number 1. So, indicating is a method of getting your stock piece dead centered in line with the axis of the chuck, of specifically the spindle, which the chuck is mounted to. That is the axis that the whole thing spins on. If your part is offset from that axis, when you start turning, you're not actually going to be turning center on your part. It's going to be offset. You're going to have a messed up part. Now, it's not too big of a deal. If I was working on this big piece of stock right here, and I just need to mill out something small on the end here, and I was going to lob it off, wouldn't make a difference, because it would all be centered on itself. I wouldn't need to center it on the body of the stock itself. This bar here, we're going to be turning both ends, so both ends need to be concentric. So we need to actually center it out. And that process is called indicating. Use an indicator to indicate center. So everyone has their own little method of doing this. It's all basically the same thing, really. But what I like to do, I got each of my jaws here on the 4 jaw marked out with little blips, 1, 2, 3, and 4. What I like to do is I'll put number 1, I'll put my indicator directly in line 90 degrees to the stock. Then I'll align my 1 and 3 jaws in line with the indicator so that I have a good reading of where it's sitting. I'll set my indicator to 0 and I'll spin it 180 degrees over to the number 3 jaw. And I'll see how far off of 0 it moved. It moved about 5 thousandths. So 5 thousandths of an inch this way. So I need to move it 2.5 thousandths that way in order to reach center. So what I'm going to do is this number 3 is reading 5, the number 1 is reading 0. I'm going to set the number 3 to 2.5. Now my number 3 is reading 2.5 over 0. My number 1 should be reading 2.5 below 0. Now it looks like my indicator is a little loose right here because something wiggled a little. So number 1, number 3, there it is. Number 3 wasn't quite set to 2.5. Sometimes you gotta just wiggle it just a little bit because these things are kind of finicky sometimes. Either that or give the chuck a full 360 degree spin. Because this setup, this Noga flex arm that the indicator is mounted to, it's a good quality arm, it's a good quality thing for holding it, but it's still not, solid. It's not rigid, completely rigid, that is. It's got a little give in it. And so every time you touch this dial, it's going to wiggle just a little bit. It's going to be a little bit like a spring. It's going to return mostly to center, but it could be a little off. So give your part 360 degree spin. That tends to get the wiggle out of it and return the arm back to its resting point, and then you can get your dial a little closer to where you want it. So as I said, this part isn't super critical that we maintain concentricity throughout the whole thing, but good practice is good practice. Alright, so number 3 is dead on 2.5. Number 1 is at 2. That's close enough. So, number 1 is low. It's low of center. Number 3 is high of center. Standard practice when you're working on an OD, if you're indicating from the outside, not from the inside, is you tighten your highs, loosen your lows. This is my low, that's my high, so I'm going to loosen this just a touch. Only need to move about 2 thousandths of an inch, so and we're just going to watch that needle move. And we're just going to pull it over to 0. Just applying a little pressure with this bar. Just bring that needle over to 0. Now 3's at 0. 1 is at 0. Alright, so now we have 0. We have center on the chuck. So now we don't have to go through the exact same process with 2 and 4. Number 2 is reading about 2 thou low. That means number 4 should be reading 2 thou high. There you go. So, loosen our lows, tighten our highs. We're going to loosen this one up a little bit. I'll give this one just a little bit of tightening. We're just going to squeeze it over to 0. let's check number 1 again. Number 1 is sitting just a little under. Number 3, just a little under. Number 2, or 4 rather, under, and 2 under. Alright, so they're all uniformly about 1 thou under my 0 mark. So, most likely that just means I tapped the indicator. Scoot that over to 0. And go through and check them all. 0, 0, number 2, 0, number 4, 0. Alright, we are centered. Actually, you want to leave this where it's at, because now these jaws aren't completely tightened at the moment. We need to tighten them one by one. They're all independently tightened. Well, as I tighten number 1, it's going to push against number 3 and throw my 0 off. So I got to watch my 0 as I tighten all these. Alright, so it looks like number 1 got thrown off a little. Number 2's off a little. So we're going to tighten 3 and 4.